In my 42 years on the bench, I've seen every type of defendant walk through my courtroom doors. The scared teenager who made a mistake, the remorseful parent who let things go too far, the defiant repeat offender who thinks they know the system better than I do. But this case, this one stayed with me in a way that few others have. A senator's son walked into my courtroom after assaulting one of my court officers, a decorated military veteran, and his attitude told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. What happened next went viral with over 8 million views, but I want to tell you the real story, not the edited clip. The whole truth about what happened that day, and why sometimes the children of powerful people need to learn the hardest lessons of all. When this case landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning, I have to admit, I read it twice. Assault on a court officer. That alone is serious. These men and women maintain order and safety in our courthouses, and an attack on them is an attack on the justice system itself. But as I read further, the details made my jaw tighten. The victim, Officer Michael Castellano, 63 years old, retired Army Sergeant, 20 years of service to our courthouse, a man I'd worked alongside for 2 decades, a man who'd never raised his voice unnecessarily, never used excessive force, always treated everyone, from judges to defendants, with professionalism and respect. The defendant, Brandon Whitmore, 22 years old, son of State Senator Richard Whitmore. No prior criminal record, but multiple complaints from college campus security that had been handled internally, the kind of record that tells you someone's been getting breaks they didn't earn. As I reviewed the security footage that morning in my chambers, I felt something I don't often feel, genuine anger, not the kind that makes you shout or throw things, the cold, measured kind that tells you someone crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. I watched that footage 3 times. Each time I saw the same thing, an unprovoked attack on a man who was simply doing his job. Each time, my resolve strengthened about what needed to happen in my courtroom. I called my clerk in. "Make sure Officer Castellano knows he has my full support," I said, "and make sure young Mr. Whitmore understands this won't be handled with a phone call from his father. Let me walk you through what happened that day, based on everything I reviewed, security footage, witness statements, and Officer Castellano's own report, which he wrote in that clear, precise way that showed his military training." It was a Thursday afternoon, around 2:30. The courthouse was busy, people coming in for hearings, lawyers meeting with clients, the usual controlled chaos of the justice system at work. Brandon Whitmore arrived at the security checkpoint, carrying a designer leather bag. Standard procedure. Everyone goes through the metal detector, bags get screened. When I watched the footage, I could see Officer Castellano gesture politely toward the X-ray machine. His body language was relaxed, professional. He'd done this thousands of times. Brandon, and you could see this clearly on camera, rolled his eyes and tossed his bag onto the belt with unnecessary force. The metal detector went off. Standard procedure dictates a secondary screening with a handheld wand. Officer Castellano stepped forward with the wand, explaining what he needed to do. That's when I heard it on the audio, and I had to have them enhance it to make sure I heard correctly. Brandon said, and I'm quoting here, "Do you know who my father is? I don't have time for this security theater. I have a meeting with Judge Patterson. I've been doing this job long enough to know that sentence, 'Do you know who my father is almost always followed by something that makes my job harder." I was right. Officer Castellano remained calm. You could see it in his posture, hear it in his voice on the recording. "Sir, I understand, but everyone goes through the same security screening. It'll just take a moment." Brandon stepped closer. Aggressive, confrontational. His finger came up, pointing at Officer Castellano's chest. "I'm not going through your little power trip routine. My father is Senator Whitmore, and one call from him will have you working mall security by Monday." Officer Castellano didn't rise to it, didn't get defensive. He simply repeated, "Sir, I need to complete the security screening, or I cannot allow you into the courthouse. That's when it happened. Brandon shoved Officer Castellano hard, with both hands to the chest. You could see the 63-year-old man stumble backward, catching himself on the screening table. And then, and this is what made my blood run cold, Brandon swung, a closed fist punch that caught Officer Castellano on the left side of his face. The sound was audible on the security footage, a sickening thud. Two other officers responded immediately, restraining Brandon, who, and witnesses confirm this, kept shouting about his father and lawsuits and how everyone was going to lose their jobs. Officer Castellano stood there, hand to his face, which was already reddening, and maintained his composure. Even then, even after being assaulted for doing his job, the medical report showed significant bruising along Officer Castellano's cheekbone and jaw. At 63, with service-related arthritis, that kind of impact isn't just painful, it's dangerous. The doctor noted he was fortunate Brandon's punch landed where it did, because a few inches to the left could have caused serious injury to his eye or temple. 12 witnesses gave statements. Security cameras captured 4 different angles. Every single piece of evidence told the same story, an unprovoked assault on a court officer who was simply doing his job with professionalism and respect. What struck me most as I reviewed everything was this. Officer Castellano, in his statement, wrote, "I hope this young man gets the help he needs to understand that his behavior is unacceptable." Even after being attacked, he was thinking about rehabilitation. That's the kind of person he is. That's the kind of person Brandon Whitmore chose to assault. As I continued reviewing the evidence over the next few days, a clearer picture emerged of who Brandon Whitmore was, and frankly, it wasn't pretty. The prosecutor brought me additional background, not to prejudice me, but to show a pattern of behavior that I needed to consider. Campus security reports from his university showed 3 separate incidents of verbal altercations with staff. One with a parking attendant, one with a cafeteria worker, one with a resident advisor. Each time, according to the reports, Brandon had invoked his father's position. Each time the matter was resolved without formal discipline. I've seen this before. Young people who grow up learning that consequences are for other people, that rules apply to everyone except them, that a phone call from a powerful parent can make any problem disappear. It creates a dangerous sense of entitlement that, if left unchecked, only grows worse. The medical documentation was extensive. Officer Castellano's doctor photographed the bruising progression over 5 days, the deep purple that spread from his cheekbone down to his jaw, the swelling that made it difficult for him to eat solid foods for 3 days. At his age, the doctor noted, recovery would take longer than it would for a younger person. 7 courthouse employees submitted character statements for Officer Castellano, describing his years of professional service. Judges I respected wrote letters praising his dedication. One letter from a public defender noted that Officer Castellano had once helped her client, a homeless veteran, connect with services after his court appearance. "He sees people, not cases," she wrote. What I didn't have was any evidence of remorse from Brandon. His father hired an expensive attorney, Jonathan Pierce, known for getting reduced charges for wealthy clients. The attorney's motions asked for pretrial diversion, community service in lieu of conviction, sealed records, all the usual attempts to make an assault disappear from someone's record. But there was one piece of evidence that crystallized everything for me. The prosecutor showed me Brandon's social media activity from the day after his arrest. While out on bail, he'd posted on Instagram a photo of himself at an expensive restaurant, wine glass raised, with the caption, "Not letting the haters slow me down." Unbothered of fake charges. When I saw that, I closed the folder and looked at my clerk. "Make sure this hearing is on the record," I said. Every word. By the time Brandon's court date arrived, the local news had picked up the story. Senator's son charged with assault on court officer. The courthouse press office told me reporters were requesting access to the hearing. Normally, I don't pay much attention to media interest. Justice doesn't change based on who's watching, but I'll admit, this case had touched a nerve in the community. People were tired of seeing privileged young people escape consequences. The comments on news articles were overwhelmingly supportive of Officer Castellano, many from veterans and other court employees who knew him personally. My bailiff mentioned that the courthouse staff would probably want to attend if there was room. I told him that was fine. This was public record after all. But I also made something clear to everyone. I don't care if this hearing has 5 observers or 500. Brandon Whitmore gets the same fair process as anyone else. I'm not playing to cameras. And I meant that. Here's what people don't always understand about viral court cases. The attention doesn't change what I do. I've been on this bench long enough to know that justice has to be blind to everything except the facts and the law. Whether 8 people see it or 8 million, my job remains the same. Be fair, follow the law, and make sure everyone understands why consequences exist. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the weight of this particular case. When someone in a position of power, or someone related to power, stands accused, people watch to see if the system actually works. Does justice apply equally, or do some people get special treatment? This wasn't just about Brandon Whitmore. It was about whether our system means what it says. When Brandon Whitmore walked into my courtroom that morning, I took a long look at him. I always do this. Observe how defendants carry themselves. What their demeanor tells me about whether they understand the gravity of their situation. Brandon wore an expensive suit, tailored perfectly, designer shoes, a watch that probably cost more than most people make in a month. But it was his expression that told me everything I needed to know. Not nervous, not remorseful, annoyed. Like this was an inconvenience, an interruption to his schedule. The courtroom was packed. I noticed Officer Castellano sitting in the front row, the bruising on his face mostly healed, but still faintly visible under the courtroom lights. Several of his fellow court officers sat behind him, their solidarity silent but powerful. Other courthouse staff filled the remaining seats. And yes, media with cameras in the back, which is allowed under our court rules. Brandon's attorney, Jonathan Pierce, stood as I entered. Everyone rose. I took my seat, arranged my notes, and looked at the defendant. Mr. Whitmore, I began, you're charged with assault on a court officer, a serious offense. Do you understand the charges against you? He nodded casually. His attorney nudged him. Yes, Brandon said, his tone carrying just enough deference to be technically respectful, but not enough to show genuine respect. I turned to the prosecutor. Present your evidence. What followed was methodical. The prosecutor played the security footage on the courtroom screens, every angle. The sound was clear, Brandon's threats, his entitled demands, and then the assault itself. I watched Brandon's face as the video played. He barely looked at the screen, just stared straight ahead, jaw set, like he was enduring something beneath him. When the video ended, I asked, Mr. Whitmore, that's clearly you in the footage, correct? Yes, Your Honor, he replied. And you struck Officer Castellano with a closed fist, correct? It was... He hesitated, glancing at his attorney. A defensive reaction. I leaned forward. Defensive against what exactly? Officer Castellano was holding a security wand and asking you to comply with standard screening procedures. He was being aggressive, Brandon said, confrontational. I've been patient with a lot of defendants over my career, but I felt my patience wearing thin. Mr. Whitmore, we just watched 4 different camera angles. Officer Castellano's voice never raised. He stepped back when you approached aggressively. Nothing about his conduct was confrontational. Do you want to reconsider your answer? His attorney stood. Your Honor, if I may, my client was stressed running late for an important meeting, and I held up my hand. Counselor, I appreciate that your client was stressed, but thousands of people come through that security checkpoint every month. Many are stressed. Many are running late. None of them assault court officers. I turned back to Brandon. The medical report shows Officer Castellano sustained significant bruising and swelling. He's 63 years old, Mr. Whitmore. a decorated Army veteran. He was doing his job with professionalism. What gives you the right to put your hands on him? For the first time, Brandon's composure cracked slightly. Look, I said I was sorry. When? I interrupted. Because I've reviewed every statement, every report, every interaction since your arrest. I haven't seen an apology anywhere. What I have seen is an Instagram post calling the charges fake and saying you're unbothered. His face flushed. That was taken out of context. Was it? I looked at the prosecutor. Can you display Exhibit 14? The Instagram post appeared on the screen. Brandon's face went from red to pale. That's you, correct? At a restaurant the day after assaulting a court officer, looking pretty unbothered by what you did. His attorney tried to intervene again, but I'd heard enough legal maneuvering. This moment needed to be between me and Brandon. Let me tell you what I see, Mr. Whitmore, I said, and I made sure my voice carried the weight of 4 decades on this bench. I see a young man who's been taught that consequences are for other people, that when you do something wrong, a phone call from your father makes it disappear, that court officers, parking attendants, cafeteria workers, people doing their jobs are beneath you. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm going to tell you something that apparently no one else has had the courage to tell you. You are not special. Your father's position does not exempt you from the law, and the man you assaulted has more honor in his little finger than you've shown in your entire 22 years. The courtroom was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Officer Castellano, I said, turning to him, would you like to address the court? He stood slowly with dignity. His voice was steady. Your Honor, I've worked in this courthouse for 20 years. I've been treated with respect by judges, by attorneys, by most defendants. Even people facing serious charges usually understand we're all just doing our jobs. What hurt most wasn't the physical pain, though that was significant. It was being treated like I was nobody, like my service, my work, my dignity meant nothing, because I was standing between this young man and wherever he wanted to go. He paused, his voice catching slightly. I have grandchildren Mr. Whitmore's age. I'd be ashamed if they ever treated someone the way he treated me. I hope this court helps him understand what his family apparently hasn't taught him. Officer Castellano sat down. I saw several people in the courtroom wiping their eyes. I looked at Brandon. For the first time, I saw something. Maybe embarrassment, maybe the first glimmer of understanding. Mr. Whitmore, do you have anything to say? He stood, and I could see his attorney had coached him on what to say, but the words that came out weren't from his lawyer. He started, then stopped. I didn't realize you didn't realize that a 63-year-old man would bruise when you punched him? Or you didn't realize there would be consequences? His jaw tightened again. The moment of vulnerability passed. I'm sorry for what happened. It won't happen again. The words were right, but the tone was wrong. Still defensive. Still more sorry he got caught than sorry for what he'd done. That's when I knew exactly what this sentencing needed to be. I took a moment before speaking. This wasn't about anger. This was about teaching a lesson that should have been taught years ago. Mr. Whitmore, I want you to understand something. I let the silence hang there for a moment. I've been a judge for 42 years. I've seen thousands of defendants stand where you're standing. Some are remorseful, some are scared, some genuinely made a terrible mistake and take full responsibility. You're annoyed that you got caught. I saw him start to protest, but I held up my hand. That Instagram post isn't the behavior of someone who understands the gravity of what they did. That casual dismissal of Officer Castellano's professionalism in your testimony isn't the attitude of someone who's learned anything. And invoking your father's position during this assault, that tells me you believe you're above the rules that govern everyone else. I leaned forward. Let me be crystal clear. You are not above the law. Your father's position as a senator means absolutely nothing in my courtroom. And Officer Castellano deserves better than what you gave him. I opened the sentencing document I'd prepared. Here's what I'm ordering, and I want you to understand why each piece matters. First, you are convicted of assault on a court officer. This will be on your record. No diversion, no sealing. When someone asks if you have a criminal conviction, you'll answer yes, and you'll explain why. Maybe that will make you think twice before treating someone this way again. Second, 60 days in county jail. Before you or your attorney objects, understand this. Officer Castellano lives with the consequences of your actions every day. You'll live with consequences too. Real ones, not consequences that money or connections can erase. I heard gasps in the courtroom. Brandon's face went white. Third, 200 hours of community service to be completed at the Veterans Center, not somewhere comfortable where your father's friends work, somewhere where you'll meet real veterans like Officer Castellano, who served their country with honor and now volunteer to help others. Maybe their example will teach you something about service and humility. Fourth, a formal written apology to Officer Castellano, approved by this court before it's delivered. And I mean a real apology, Mr. Whitmore, not the kind your attorney writes, one where you acknowledge exactly what you did wrong and the impact it had. Fifth, anger management counseling, weekly, for 1 year. Because your reaction to a basic security screening was to assault someone, which tells me you have serious issues managing your emotions when you don't get your way. Finally, a $5,000 fine paid directly to the Court Officer Benevolent Fund. That money will support officers like the one you assaulted. I looked at him directly. Mr. Whitmore, this sentence isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about teaching you what you should have learned long ago. Your actions have consequences. People aren't obstacles to be shoved aside when they inconvenience you. And respect isn't something you get because of who your father is. It's something you earn through how you treat others, especially those in service positions. I paused again. You're 22 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. I genuinely hope you use these 60 days to think about who you want to be. Because right now, the person I see in front of me, that's not someone I'd want my grandchildren to become. That's not someone who contributes to society. That's someone who takes and demands and expects the world to bend to their will. You have a choice, Mr. Whitmore. You can be bitter about this sentence, blame everyone else, and learn nothing. Or you can take responsibility, genuinely apologize, and become a better man. That choice is yours. But the consequences of your assault, those are mine to determine, and I've determined them. I brought my gavel down. Court is adjourned. After I delivered the sentence, the courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Then Brandon's attorney immediately started discussing appeal options, but I noticed Brandon himself just stood there, staring at the defense table. Reality was setting in. 60 days in jail was real. A criminal record was permanent. His father's influence couldn't make this disappear. Officer Castellano approached the bench as people started filing out. Your Honor, thank you, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated like they don't matter. I shook his hand. Michael, you've served this courthouse with dignity for 20 years. You deserve justice, and I'm glad I could deliver it. What struck me as I left the courtroom was the number of court staff who stopped me, security officers, clerks, bailiffs, thanking me quietly. One officer, a woman who'd worked courthouse security for 15 years, had tears in her eyes. We deal with entitled people every day, she said. Most of the time, nothing happens. This mattered. Later that afternoon, my clerk told me the video of the sentencing was spreading online. By evening, it had millions of views. People were sharing it with comments about accountability, about entitled youth, about how justice should work. The local news ran stories. National outlets picked it up. But what I told my staff was this. I didn't do this for views or viral videos. I did it because it was right, because Officer Castellano deserved justice, and because young Mr. Whitmore needed to learn a lesson before he hurt someone else. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. It was from Brandon, handwritten, sent from the county jail. I read it carefully. It wasn't the court-mandated apology. That would come later, reviewed by the victim before being finalized. This was different. Personal. He wrote about the first week in jail, how terrifying it was, how humbling. He wrote about talking to his cellmate, a military veteran serving time for a DUI, who told him about real service and sacrifice. He wrote, "For the first time, I understand that my actions hurt someone, really hurt them, not just physically, but in ways I didn't see because I wasn't looking. I don't know if Brandon Whitmore truly changed. Time would tell, but at least he was starting to think about it. Sometimes that's all we can hope for." If there's one thing I want people to take away from this case, it's this: respect isn't optional, and consequences matter. I've been on this bench for 42 years, and I've watched our society change in many ways, some good, some concerning. One of the most troubling trends I've seen is this growing sense among some young people, especially those from privileged backgrounds, that rules don't apply to them, that service workers are beneath them, that their connections or their family name exempts them from basic human decency. Social media makes it worse. When you can post something dismissive and get likes and supportive comments from friends who don't know the full story, it reinforces the idea that you're the victim, that consequences are unfair, that everyone else is wrong. But here's the truth. Actions have consequences. They always have. They always will. And no Instagram post, no parent's political position, no expensive attorney can change the fundamental reality that when you hurt someone, that matters. Officer Michael Castellano spent 20 years serving our courthouse with dignity. He's a veteran who served his country with honor. He was doing his job, a job that keeps all of us safe. When Brandon Whitmore decided that convenience was more important than respect, that's not acceptable, not in my courtroom, not in our society. What I hope Brandon learned, and what I hope everyone watching learned, is that we are all accountable for how we treat others, especially those in service positions, the security officers, the retail workers, the parking attendants, the people who make our daily lives function. They deserve respect. They deserve dignity. And when someone violates that, there must be consequences. This case went viral not because I did anything dramatic, but because people are hungry to see accountability. They're tired of watching privileged individuals escape consequences. They want to believe the system works fairly. And here's what I can tell you after 42 years. The system works when we make it work. When judges do their jobs without fear or favor. When prosecutors seek justice, not just convictions. When defense attorneys advocate zealously but ethically. When all of us remember that the law applies equally to everyone. That's what justice means to me. That's what I still believe, even after 4 decades on this bench. And that's what I hope Brandon Whitmore and everyone watching takes from this case. Respect matters. Service matters. Accountability matters. And your actions, whether online or in a courthouse security line, always have consequences. That's not being dramatic. That's called being a judge.